solution to all issues, including that of Kashmir. And in today's meeting, we have Ambassador Shahid Amin and our permanent representative, Ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Munir Akram, to talk about political solutions of Kashmir. I personally think that this effort of ours on behalf of Rotary International is an effort to find solutions to our problem, not get into the blame and shame game. At this note, I will hand over to Dr. Sabia, who will be the moderator for this session. Dr. Sabia, you're on. Unmute yourself. Yes.
It says you're muted by the host.
Okay. Ramiz, make sure that Dr. Sabia is unmuted.
Yeah, she is co-host and she can unmute herself.
Go on.
All right. All right. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to our session on political solutions for Kashmir issue this evening. On behalf of Rotary International District 327, a very special welcome goes out to the participants, Ambassador Shahid Amin, Ambassador Munir Akram, who've so kindly consented to be the speakers this evening. A very warm welcome to Mr. Javed Jabbar. A very warm welcome to, I'm not too sure if my Rotary governor has joined in yet. Okay, never mind. To all friends, Rotarians, ladies and gentlemen, all district officers of Rotary, everybody who's logged on to our session, I'd like to extend a very, very warm welcome to you all. I'm looking forward to this great evening. These are highly seasoned diplomats, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it as much as I'm going to. I'm your moderator, Dr. Sabiha Khan, currently serving as the Assistant Governor under Dr. Farhan Issa, District 3271. Let me explain the format and the house rules for this session. Ambassador Shahid and Ambassador Munir will be introduced at first, and then they will deliver the talk on the political solution. Since your mics have been muted, please write your questions in the chat box. Address it to the speaker that you want to answer, or whosoever you choose, or if you leave it that way, then any of the speakers, either of them will take it up and answer them. Once the speakers are done, it will be followed by the question answer session. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you all are waiting to hear our speakers as much as I am, but there's just a minute talk that I'd like to introduce you on the subject. Mr. Khan has already done that. Kashmir has been at the heart of a territorial dispute between India and Pakistan since the two nations gained their independence in 1947. The dispute over Kashmir has deep roots in the past. It has tricky clashes of principles and grave risks for the future. Tensions have risen further after India has ended the special status for Jammu and Kashmir by revoking Article 370 in 2019. Several leaders, they were taken into custody, some released, some are still in custody, communications blocked, thousands of troops patrol the streets. Pakistan worries about it. Pakistan worries about ethnic cleansing. So, are we looking at genocide? Now, Kashmir is a geopolitical hotspot. There are 3 countries that lay claim to parts of this region, and they're all nuclear powers. India and Pakistan, both nuclear power, China, nuclear power. Now, the current aggression between them could push the entire South Asian region towards a dangerous conflict. Recently at the UN, Pakistan has proposed for a strategic restraint. In fact, this was done by our speaker this evening, Mr. Ambassador Munir Akram. Any misadventure could make Kashmir one of the most dangerous places on the planet. Of course, this is besides the corona hotspots that are going on in different spots in the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, we need solutions to the conflict. Both our speakers today are seasoned diplomats. Let's hear their expert opinions, what they have to say about it. Now, I'd like to ask Rotary Club Centennial's President Akram to introduce our first speaker for this evening, that is Ambassador Shahid Amin. Akram, will you introduce the ambassador, please?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much, Sabia. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Mr. Shahid Amin is a senior Pakistani diplomat who served for 39 years in Pakistan Foreign Service. He held ambassadorial posts for 18 years, serving as ambassador to Libya, Soviet Union, France, Nigeria, and Saudi Arabia. Since retirement, he is involved in teaching, writing, and as an analyst on TV and radio. He is the author of 7 books on foreign policy and history. Born in Delhi, he holds master's degrees in English literature and international relations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Shahid Amin. Thank you.
Thank you, Akram. Mr. Shahid Amin, can we have you for your talk, please?
I unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. President Rotary Club, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Kashmir obviously is a very important issue. We all have heard about it, talked about it, all hold opinions about it. There's a great deal of emotion. But I think at some point of time, we need an objective analysis. I respect emotion, of course, that is very much natural. But when great issues of war and peace are discussed, I think objectivity is very important. Now, I'd start by my first point is what are the rights and wrongs in the Kashmir issue? We must start with some kind of a value judgment. I certainly hold that India is morally, legally wrong in Kashmir. Moreover, it has unleashed a reign of terror. It has been guilty of massive violations of human rights. This is all well known, well documented. International bodies have expressed their views on this subject. It has violated, of course, the 1947 partition formula, which was that contiguous Muslim majority areas will go to Pakistan and contiguous non-Muslim majority areas will go to India. By this logic, Kashmir should have come to Pakistan. Moreover, India made many promises, especially Prime Minister Nehru, and India has reneged on those promises and also has gone against UN Security Council resolutions demanding that a plebiscite be held in Kashmir to determine the wishes of the Kashmiri people, whether they want to join Pakistan or they want to join India. And so, and the latest, of course, as you mentioned, is the abolition of the special status of Jammu and Kashmir by abolishing Article 370 and 35A. These actions are totally contrary even to the Indian Constitution and the promises made to the Kashmiri people. So I conclude this point of a moral judgment by saying India is clearly wrong and Pakistan is clearly right in supporting the cause of the Kashmiri people. which is basically what do they want? Do they want to join India or do they want to join Pakistan? My second point is that the present government under Prime Minister Imran Khan is doing its best to highlight the Kashmir issue. And I think some degree of progress has been made. There's more international awareness of Kashmir and its causes than before. However, the hard reality remains that India is hardly under any meaningful international pressure. Pakistan is not getting anywhere near adequate support on the Kashmir issue, even from traditional friends like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Iran. Now, why is this so? Of course, many Pakistanis tend to blame our government and especially the foreign service. Our diplomats are held as the scapegoats. No, it is not as if the countries of the world are not aware of what India is doing, its oppression in Kashmir. The world's apathy is due to India's size, economic, political, and military. These countries are unwilling to harm their bilateral relations with India, which are very important from the point of view of their national interest. And therefore, they turn a blind eye to Indian oppression in Kashmir. So the issue is not awareness or lack of awareness of the reality in Kashmir, but a deliberate policy, what you can call realpolitik, of giving preference to their bilateral interests in India rather than holding on to any principles. My third point is there is a lot of emotions and there are exaggerations and even myths. And that clouds our judgment, especially if there is a meaningful discussion of this Kashmir issue. I'll name those, what I call exaggerations and myths. One exaggeration. Is Kashmir Pakistan's jugular vein? This is something we hear again and again. Now, India has been in control of the greater part of Kashmir for 70 years, and yet Pakistan has survived. So clearly Kashmir could not be a jugular vein when the jugular vein is in the hand of the other party, which has been at war with you, and there has been periods of tension and so forth. So this is an exaggeration and again clouds judgment. Then there is also a deep worry about India's intention to, for instance, divert the rivers which come from Indian occupied Kashmir into Pakistan. In my view, this is physically impossible. Indus is a very small river. When it passes through Indian occupied territory, it becomes a big river only after it enters Pakistan. So it is almost impossible to touch the Indus or divert the Indus. Jhelum and Chenab also, again, it would be, I think, nearly impossible to divert these waters to, say, towards India. And in any case, the Indus Water Treaty has held good for the last 60 years or so. So I do not think this is an issue about which we make so much of noise, and Pakistan will be a barren country and we will be ruined, etc., etc. But I think this is an exaggeration, again, tends to affect our judgment. Another thing, we keep insisting on a plebiscite in Kashmir, but not enough attention is paid to the three parts of Indian occupied Kashmir. Of course, there is the Kashmir Valley, which is 90% or 97% Muslim. But how about Jammu, which has a non-Muslim majority? And even Ladakh has got a non-Muslim majority. So there should be awareness in Pakistan that even if a plebiscite is held, which of course India has no intention of allowing, at least so far as one can see, the results may not be quite as favorable from Pakistan's point of view as has been generally believed. I think there is another recent kind of alarm that India may seize Azad Kashmir by some sudden military action. I think this is another exaggeration. Firstly, Pakistan is a nuclear state. Any attempt to disturb the situation in Kashmir, especially invading and occupying Azad Kashmir, would lead to a full-scale war. And that is, I suppose, something which both countries will have to avoid. Secondly, I think I take note of the fact that in the recent past, in the last few months, China has been showing a very energetic or robust posture in Ladakh. And I think, in my view, that is really a warning to India that if China can be so tough and even aggressive in holding on to 40 kilometers of territory in Ladakh, how much more aggressive it would be in case India were to threaten CPEC, which is of vital importance to China. So I think with all that background, it is clearly an exaggeration to think that India is capable of seizing Azad Kashmir or disturbing CPEC. That would obviously lead to a very grave security situation and, in fact, war. I think with all that we have seen over the last 70 years, another issue on which Pakistan, many people in Pakistan are not really fully aware is that yes, we have adopted a very principled position on Kashmir, but it has hurt Pakistan also. Pakistan has paid a pretty heavy price for its stance on Kashmir. I think the loss of East Pakistan was directly responsible due to the hostility in India, which has essentially been generated by the Kashmir dispute. And we have been forced to spend so much on our defense and so forth, which is partially responsible for our economic difficulties. So those who talk in terms of outright confrontation and so forth should at least be aware as to what are the costs that Pakistan has paid so far by holding on to its particular stance on Kashmir. With this, I come to the subject of your discussion today, which are the options on Kashmir. Hopefully, we all want peace, but let us look at the various options. Basically, I'm referring to a solution of the Kashmir problem. What are the options? The first obvious option, obviously, is dialogue. But I'm afraid under the present Indian government, dialogue is very unlikely. In fact, all Indian governments have been very, very adamant and intransigent in talks. In fact, in one of my books, I've said that whenever there is a dialogue, it is really a dialogue of the deaf. They do not listen to what we are saying, and we are not listening to what they are saying. So it is a ritual exercise in which both sides say their piece, but neither has any intention of really reaching a meaningful compromise. In any case, the present government in India, which is a very Hindu nationalistic government, has adopted an even harder stance on Kashmir, and look at what they have done in terms of abolition of Article 370 and others. So I have, my judgment would be that dialogue is a no-go situation, at least in the immediate future. Now, we can say there's always the option of war, which many people in Pakistan suggest, and some in India suggest. I sometimes see Indian news media, I'm appalled by the hatred they are generating all the time. Our media hardly says anything against India, but if you watch Indian media, it is just utterly full of hatred for Pakistan, saying the nastiest possible thing against Pakistan. इनकी टांगे तोड़ दो, इनको मार डालो, इनको खत्म कर डालो, इस किस्म की ज़बान इस्तेमाल की जाती है. So I think both sides, there are these hardliners on both sides. They should be aware that war is not an option. War between two nuclear states will destroy both countries. This is what is called MAD, mutually assured destruction. So war must be avoided at all costs. Now, there are those in Pakistan who say, well, we have to help the Kashmiri people in a meaningful way, and they suggest, or probably they have in mind, giving some armed support to the Kashmiri struggle, which continues. But I am opposed to anything like that. because this, for instance, sending jihadis or supporting jihadis plays right into India's hands. India wants to shift attention from the real issue, which is the heroic struggle of the Kashmiri people for liberation. And India wants to divert it into cross-border terrorism, Islamic extremism, Islamic terrorism, and so forth. So those who advocate supporting jihadis or sending jihadis across are actually serving India's India's aim. In the 1990s, you remember there was a great deal of such activity, especially after the end of the jihad in Afghanistan. Finally, what was achieved? I think thousands of Kashmiris were dead, 70,000 or something. India used absolute force, but also all kind of casualties took place because of the use of the militancy. And what was achieved? Did Hafiz Saeed secure the independence of Kashmir? Was the Indian army defeated? So these people who raise emotions, and they are all the time suggesting do something meaningful in terms of giving armed assistance and so forth, are really harming the Kashmir cause. The Kashmir cause is a great struggle for right of self-determination. The Kashmiri peoples have shown heroic resistance for 70 years. It is absolutely amazing. It is really a saga in human sacrifices and struggle. And please do not defame this struggle by allowing these jihadis to get into the act. They achieve nothing excepting to give a bad name to a very just struggle. So now, what is our option? Our option, I think, remains continue moral, political, media support for the Kashmir cause. Raise it at all possible forums, particularly in human rights forum. Human rights violation by India should be the focus of our effort, because on this issue, there will be at least more support from the world, and especially human rights organizations, than otherwise. No doubt, I mean, I agree that whatever our diplomats can do in terms of improving their performance, they should do that. I'm not holding a brief for our diplomats that they are doing a fantastic job. I think they are doing their best, and this can be further improved. So from that point of view, I agree, yes, activate your diplomats and your diplomacy. The effort really should be to influence the Western news media, which is very, very, I mean, that really does play a big role in affecting world opinion. So I would conclude by saying, yes, the best guarantee for Kashmir's freedom is the struggle of the Kashmiri people, which has, if anything, gained further strength after India's dictatorial measures last year. Even those who were pro-India, those Kashmiri figures or political figures who were pro-India have turned anti-India. So India has practically no friends left in Kashmir. The Kashmiris are united in seeking liberation from India. They will continue this struggle, and Pakistan should give them every possible moral and diplomatic support. And I also hold the view that there is no need for pessimism. Sometimes these struggles take a long time, but finally they succeed. The lesson of the 20th century is that practically all national liberation struggles have succeeded. All colonies have become independent. In South Africa, there was a change in spite of the fact that the white racist regime was seen to be in total control. France gave up Algeria, USA gave up Vietnam, and Afghanistan liberated itself twice, once from the Soviet Union and second from the USA. So I do believe that, inshallah, eventually the Kashmiri struggle will succeed, and at some point of time, there will be a change of opinion in India itself. That I think will be the stage when a solution of the Kashmir issue can be found. So we must continue all our diplomatic moral support for the Kashmiri cause, highlight the human rights violations, and hope for the best. Otherwise, the other courses are desperate and really self-defeating and must be avoided. Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much. That was very enlightening. Lots of points that leave us with plenty more thought. But I'm relieved to hear that you said that war is not an option and that it should be avoided at all costs. Despite all niggling issues, despite all major issues, despite however both countries are behaving, but war should not be an option. With that, thank you very much, sir. We'll now wait for the question answer session later. Now, our second speaker for the evening is Ambassador Munir Akram. I'd like to ask Senator Javed Jabbar to introduce him, please. Javed.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Dr. Sabia Khan, for this invitation. It's a privilege for me to present an introduction to His Excellency, Ambassador Munir Akram, who has accepted the position of permanent representative of Pakistan to the United Nations with the rank of Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary with effect from 1st also represented Pakistan as the permanent representative from Belgium and Luxembourg. During his term at the UN, Ambassador Akram served twice as President of the Security Council in May 2003 and May 2004, and President of the Economic and Social Council in 2005, Chairman of the Group of 77 in China developing countries in 2007, and facilitator on the UN administrative reforms process in 2006. Among the positions held in the intergovernmental context, as member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament, Chairman of the WTO Trade Policy Review Body, and President of the Conference on Disarmament in June 1996. Ambassador Akram joined the Foreign Service in 1967 and held several positions in the ministry. He obtained a bachelor's degree in law and a master's degree in political science from the University of Karachi. He is a prolific writer. He has lectured and published several articles and papers on various strategic, political, and economic issues. In recognition of his selfless services and outstanding performance in the field of diplomacy and foreign policy, he was conferred Hilal-e-Qaid-e-Azam by the President of Pakistan. Look forward to being enlightened by his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Javed. Ambassador Munir Akram, can we have your, can you share your thoughts with us for this evening?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sabia, and thank you very much, Javed, for that very generous introduction, and thank you, Naveed, for the initiative to invite me to this meeting. This is, of course, for me, a coming back to Jesus' moment in terms of you are all from my home city, and some very old friends among you. So I think I can talk, despite my sort of official position at the moment, which is, as Ambassador Shahid Amin would know, constraining in some ways. But as friends, I'd like to speak a little informally and perhaps cross my brief, so to speak, on Kashmir. First of all, I'd like to underline that Kashmir, of course, is the core of the difficulties between India and Pakistan. And that a resolution of this issue will contribute to a degree of normalization between India and Pakistan. And it would, of course, the primary contribution that it would have is that it would avoid the danger of war between two nuclear states, and perhaps also open the doors to trade and investment and connectivity, which is at least at the present moment, the key to the promotion of prosperity in all parts of the world. Connectivity, investment, trade, and technological development. This has been always the promise between India and Pakistan, because when they were created as separate nations, there still was, for example, a bilateral understanding which was reflected in the GATT and later in the WTO constitution, which envisaged a free market between the two countries, a customs union between the two countries. But of course, all this was aborted very, very quickly after partition and the disputes which arose between the two new nations on Kashmir and other issues. One thing, the difficulties of resolving Kashmir have been known, and those of us, including Ambassador Shahid Amin, who have dealt with India, and as Ambassador Shahid Amin mentioned, how the dialogue of the deaf that we have engaged in for so many decades with India. I think there is a basic flaw, and the basic issue is that I do not believe that the hostility between India and Pakistan is limited to Kashmir. I think the Modi government has revealed the real face of the sentiments that are entertained at the popular level in India about Pakistan. The Modi government, after all, has 80% support from the Hindu population, and is reflective of the animosity which is religious and ideological towards the Muslims, not only the Muslims of Pakistan, but the Muslims of India. And that is, at the moment at least, that is the core of the issue, is the hatred and animosity which precludes any dialogue and which precludes any consideration on the part of India, at least, of the human rights, the fundamental rights, the humanity of the Kashmiri people. That is not there in the calculations of the Modi government as such. We started on addressing Kashmir in 1947 in the Security Council, and at that time, the consideration was how to organize a plebiscite. The differences at that time, if you read the history, was what are the impediments to the exercise of a plebiscite? Mutual withdrawal of forces, organization, administration of the plebiscite situation. These were the issues. And India, obviously in hindsight, obfuscated on those issues. And then in the mid-50s, it resiled from the exercise of plebiscite, although it continued to say that we are willing to sit with Pakistan and negotiate a settlement. And since the mid-60s or late 50s, the exercise became, what is a negotiated settlement? And there were multiple talks that were held at various levels between the two countries to advance in negotiated settlement. And it is said by many that we came the closest to a negotiated settlement under the so-called Musharraf formula, where there was an advance towards a solution, which I would call a solution which was autonomy plus, independence minus for Jammu and Kashmir. So the idea was that both sides would give maximum to the parts of the state of Jammu and Kashmir which they presently control, without changing the physical control by the two sides of those parts of Kashmir that they hold. There would be an open border between the two parts of Kashmir, at least a soft border, between the two sides of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. And the hard borders would be along the outer limits of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So that was roughly the solution that was considered and has been described by former Foreign Minister Kasuri and others in his book. But there was a catch. It was firstly that the two sides said we will have a joint administration, that Pakistan would have a say in what happens on the Indian side, and India would have a say on what happens on the Pakistani side. And I believe that this was a complex arrangement, that in the final analysis, it would not have worked because it was not acceptable to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, especially to the Muslims in the valley of Jammu and Kashmir, and it was not acceptable to some other parts of Jammu and Kashmir. And the complex arrangement could have resulted in much greater difficulties, because you can imagine if there was a voice in the administration of Pakistani administered Kashmir, including Gilgit-Baltistan, India could have played havoc with our relationship and our connectivity with Pakistan's only and big ally, that is China. So because of the rejection by the Kashmiris, especially in the valley, and because of the complexity, I do not believe that that would have been a solution. And in any case, India did not accept that. In the final analysis, President Musharraf left office, that approach was discarded. And then with the passage of time and the assumption of office by the Modi government, things completely changed. The Kashmiri struggle was tainted with the tar of terrorism. And then, of course, on the 5th of August, 2019, the Indian government abrogated autonomy for its part of Jammu and Kashmir, split the state into two between Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir, and imposed a repression as such. At the present time, therefore, if you look at the legal situation of India in Jammu and Kashmir, it has discarded the 1947 resolutions. It has discarded Article 370, which was its only tenuous legal link and claim on Jammu and Kashmir. And therefore, its presence there is now merely because the use of naked force. And it is a forcible aggression. and it is quite visible that this aggression is being resisted in Kashmir by the people, especially the Muslim, the valley, which is virtually 97% Muslim, and there is a strong resistance to that. What is the solution under the circumstances? As Ambassador Shahid Amin has said, at the moment, Pakistan has no option but to launch a massive diplomatic and political campaign across the world to draw attention to the plight of the Kashmiri people, to draw attention to the fact that this is an issue which could become a nuclear flashpoint between the two countries, to draw the world's attention to the human rights violations and to the danger to international peace and security because of this conflict. But in the final analysis, yes, I think the effort that has been made and the results which have been achieved can of course be denigrated, can be diminished in the media by saying, well, what's happened? Fact of the matter is that for the first time in almost 50 years, Pakistan did go back to the Security Council. And we did raise the issue in the Security Council as such. And I think people should understand why we didn't go to the Security Council for 50 years. It was not because we thought that a bilateral solution with India was could be negotiated rapidly that we didn't go to the Security Council. We did not go because we did not have the assurance, the assurance that once we go there, our position, the 1947 resolutions, will not be compromised. Today, we have that assurance that the position, legal position of the Security Council resolutions will not be compromised. We've got an assurance from the Secretary General of the United Nations, who made a statement on the 8th of August, which said clearly that a solution to Kashmir has to be on the basis of the UN Charter, the Security Council resolutions, and bilateral agreements. This was the clearest statement by the Secretary General of the United Nations in several decades. And therefore, we went to the Security Council and we've had an intense discussion. It has been closed discussions, but there have been intense discussions on both on the political issue, on the security issue, and on the human rights aspect. We've gone to the Human Rights Council and we had a statement adopted by 53 countries last March. 53 countries joined us, mostly Islamic countries, but 53 countries joined us in issuing a statement against the measures taken by the Modi government and about the human rights violations that are taking place there. Since then, the High Commissioner for Human Rights has issued 6 statements expressing concern about the human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir. Last month, on the 4th of last month, a joint statement was issued by 18 special rapporteurs of the Human Rights Council, 18 special rapporteurs dealing with extrajudicial killing, dealing with disappearances, dealing with the fundamental rights to expression and freedom of association. All of them joined together and issued a statement of concern about the human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir and in India, and concluded by saying that the human rights situation in India is, quote, in free fall, unquote. So I think there is international recognition that there are massive violations of human rights that are taking place in Jammu and Kashmir. And this is supported by the fact that there are massive violations of human rights taking in India across the board because of the policies of this government, because of its policies not only towards Indian Muslims, 200 Muslims in India, 100 million Dalits in India. This is a regime which believes in the high caste Hindu right to rule over a divided society. It's an ideological regime. It is not a normal government. And this is evident in all its expressions within India. Of course, why hasn't the international community come forward to express its strong censure? Why haven't the governments of who are human rights defenders, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, liberty and equality, all of those governments with their moral standards and their moral preachings to the rest of the world, how is it that they have not come out openly to censure India, much less to do anything in the sort of sanctions that are imposed on other countries which violate human rights? And as I think, as Ambassador Shahid Amin has said, it's because not only because of the size. Yes, India is a large country, but India has benefited from the geopolitical environment. There is today a major confrontation that has broken out between the United States and China, and Russia as a third pole in that confrontation. And India is being pursued as the player which can tip the balance in this confrontation. So the United States is pursuing India as a strategic ally. It has showered all kinds of gifts on India, from arms to technology to open door on investment. Everything is open and available to India because of the American obsession with containing the rise of China. So this is the geopolitical reality that has helped India to resist the onslaught of the human rights lobbies in the world, those who believe in human rights. Normally, India would have been censured, at least, but the geopolitical realities have helped India to keep the mouth shut of these countries which are in normal times the defenders of democracy and human rights. And their hypocrisy is now in front of all the world. So what is the solution? Where do we go from here? Pakistan, of course, will continue and has to continue its moral and diplomatic campaign against the situation of human rights in India. There are some signs of hope. If there is a Biden administration in Washington, they have a higher commitment to human rights. Kamala Harris has in fact been critical of the Indian policies in Jammu and Kashmir before she became a candidate, and she has not been so vocal since then. But hopefully a Biden administration, which looks more and more likely to take the White House unless Trump is able to frustrate that through judicial means, that administration may be more amenable to the human rights situation in India and in Jammu and Kashmir in particular. Secondly, I think much is said about the weakness of the OIC countries and the lack of support for Kashmir. But they're at the popular level in many of the Arab countries and many Islamic countries, especially Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. Through our diplomatic campaign, what is evident is that at the popular level, there is complete support for the Kashmiri rights and for the Kashmiri position at the popular level. Now, of course, some of these regimes in the Arab world are authoritarian. They do not translate, their public opinion does not translate into policy. But I think there is a level beyond which they cannot go. And they have to express the solidarity with the Kashmiri people, at least in the context of the OIC, and in Arab and Islamic forums, we will be able, and we have been able, and we will be able to generate support and pressure through the OIC. So we do not give up on the OIC, despite the weaknesses that we see in their positions. And thirdly, I think we should not diminish the importance of what has happened in Ladakh. China and India have a disputed border where there are several points of friction. China not only has claimed with respect to the line of actual control in Ladakh, but it extends on the eastern side, and it extends to a Chinese claim on the whole of Arunachal Pradesh as what they call southern Tibet. So that friction that exists between India and China cannot be discounted in this struggle for Jammu and Kashmir. I agree with Ambassador Shahid Amin. There is no question, no chance of India taking actions like an aggression across the line of control to take over what they call Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. I do not think that they will be facing Pakistan, of course, but they will also be impinging on the vital interests of China. And that, I think, they will not contemplate as such. So in the campaign, if in the final analysis, the Pakistani diplomatic campaign does not succeed in changing policy, repression continues in Indian-occupied Kashmir, atrocities begin to take place because the Kashmiri resistance is rising with time. It has not been put down. The Kashmiri resistance over the last year is gaining strength, and it will gain strength, and it is gaining strength without Pakistani moral support or material support. There are no jihadis going across the line of control. Imran Khan has said no. Exactly the point which Ambassador Shahid Amin made. Though you will be the enemies of Pakistan if you cross over and start another jihad as happened in the 1990s. No, this struggle is an indigenous struggle of the Kashmiri people, and therefore much more difficult. It's much more difficult struggle without external support. But they are doing it. They are resisting. They have not succumbed to Indian atrocities and pressure. India has no lines of communications with any Kashmiris, from the people who served as their chief ministers, the Abdullahs and the Muftis. They have no contact. They have no avenue for dialogue. They have not been able to turn any of the Kashmiris with either force or fraud. Therefore, the Kashmiri struggle will continue. And when that continues, when the escalation rises, India will blame Pakistan, and India could then threaten a war with Pakistan. And when it does, we will be in a better position because we will be militarily on the defensive, politically on the offensive, and we will have the support of our ally, which is China, sitting across on the northern neck of Jammu and Kashmir. That is the strategic situation. Now, there may not be, this does not point to what the political solution could be, but there are compulsions on India, internally and externally, to find a solution. It has not found a solution within occupied Kashmir. It has not been able to have the boldness to have a dialogue with Pakistan for a solution. But the events that are happening, the likely course of the struggle that is taking place will lead to a place where the international community will have to join in and call for a solution of Jammu and Kashmir. And then we will be in a position to negotiate. At this time, we have not reached that point. Thank you very much, Sabir.
Thank you very much, sir. That was a very, very insightful talk. And many references, many incidences and all, but it's an alarming situation. Like I said, that Kashmir seems to be like a melting pot at the moment. And we can only hope for the best. That's why we are all looking for solutions, and it's up to the wise ones to implement. All right, sir. Thank you very much. So we'll wait for the questions to come up. Javed, would you like to say something? Would you like to add to both the speakers?
Thank you, Dr. Sabia Khan, but I'm not going to intrude and claim to be adding anything to what they have both very insightfully.
Would you like to add?
They have, yeah, I will. But I will only say that I think put together, the two ambassadors have very aptly and accurately defined both the situation on the ground and on the diplomatic and state level. If perhaps I might add that we need to make a special effort to engage with the people of India, the majority of which has voted against the BJP in the previous election. They are segmented, and there is a certain national chauvinistic, perhaps, unity on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, because it has been misrepresented as being inalienably a part of India. But I think we need to make a much more active effort to reach out to the people of India, which will not help perhaps overnight change state policy, but will help them better appreciate Pakistan as a state and as a people, because I am appalled at the colossal ignorance that exists in India, even among educated people, about what the reality of Pakistani society and the Pakistani state is today. We are seen only in unidimensional terms of being dominated by the military, of being a very revanchist, obscurantist society and state. Whereas we are a very forward-looking people committed to peace. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now with that, we've come to the end of the talk, and now we shall open the question answer session. Now I've got a number of questions in my chat box. So this is, and the questions are general. They said any of the speakers where would like to go can answer that. So the first question is that, is there any serious reflection on the fact that the solution to the Kashmir struggle could be neither to stay with India, nor to join Pakistan, but to have a third way, possibly full independence? Any of the speakers would like to answer that? Ambassador Shahid, Ambassador Munir, Akram, any of you? Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, theoretically, there is a third option, which is independence for Jammu and Kashmir. I don't think it has been expressed in any meaningful way. Yes, periodically, you have some people saying that, but it has never developed into the shape of a movement. What India has done in the last few years has, I think, even influenced those who had some pro-independence sentiment to come closer to the union with Pakistan. For instance, you notice in demonstrations, the Pakistan flag is raised. People who are martyred are buried sometimes with the Pakistan flag around them. Pakistani popular patriotic songs are played in those meetings. So if anything, whatever was the strength of the pro-independence sentiment has diminished because of Indian actions in the last few years, particularly the abolition of Article 370. In any case, let's go back to the UN Security Council resolution. They clearly say the option is either join India or Pakistan. The third option is not mentioned there, and neither government has ever stated it as a possible option. So I think it is no more than a theoretical discussion that there could be independence. But if that stage comes, I personally, in my book, which I took up this issue at length, at least I gave my own opinion that even independence would suit Pakistan. Why? Because it will be a case of the Kashmiris undoing the Indian occupation. And once Kashmir is independent, then the natural factors will flow in Pakistan's favor. The natural routes of communication are through Pakistan. The ethnic and religious links are with Pakistan. Kashmir would be a kind of a landlocked area whose main access will be through Pakistan. And in any case, we want the Kashmiri peoples to do well, and whatever is their sentiment, we'll go along with it. And I think that sentiment is clearly against Indian occupation, and whether it is union with Pakistan or independence, either option would be more favorable to Pakistan than to India.
Thank you, sir. There's another thing that I'd like to ask you is that while you were giving us a talk, you said that there was a value judgment to the whole issue, right? That's the thing you brought in. And I wondered, for that value judgment, who decides it? Then this is a question that it concerns the fate of the Kashmiris. How very strange that their voice or their independence has never been taken into account. I mean, at the UN level, how come you say that only two options have been given, either India or Pakistan? So how is it toggled this way?
Yes, I mean, if you go back to the origins of the Kashmir dispute and the way it was taken to the UN Security Council, the issue all along was a choice between India and Pakistan. Independence was never really an option, and therefore the UN Security Council never mentioned them. But I do agree, as a political analyst, that there is a certain pro-independence sentiment also in Kashmir. But if anything, it has diminished over the period of time. However, I've already explained that supposing the Kashmiris opt for independence, even that course is better than being ruled by India in the manner under the greatest oppression and violation of human rights. Even that option of independence will suit Pakistan.
Thank you, sir. My next question is to Ambassador Munir Akram. It says, a few years back, Foreign Affairs magazine released a report that no government in Delhi will survive if Kashmir issue is compromised. Furthermore, the government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi chose to eliminate Article 370, which is a Rubicon crossing moment in Indian politics. The question now is, what exactly will India gain if it gets onto the discussion table? Peace at what cost?
Thank you. I think no government in India or Pakistan will be able to survive if the solution on Kashmir that they accept is seen to be unacceptable to their respective people. I think the sentiments on both sides, as Ambassador Shahid Amin has stated, this is an emotional issue. Now, apart from being a territorial issue, it's a highly emotive issue because it's an issue about the identity of the two countries as such. So I think that is a right conclusion. But we have to think of the acceptance to the people of Pakistan as well. And we, at the moment, we do not have an ideologically inspired government like that rules in New Delhi, which insists on a Hindu ideology as being the prevalent feature in India. But we do have very strong religious parties which are committed to the freedom of Jammu and Kashmir. We can call them jihadis or whatever, but that is part of Pakistan. That is part of the sentiments of the Pakistani people, and we cannot ignore that either. So I think that's why it is a tricky issue. It is not an easy issue to solve, but it has to be solved as such. What India has to gain for, I think, they are unable to talk to the Kashmiris. The Kashmiris are not willing to talk to them without changing back or restoring the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir and rescinding the 5 August measures. They have no dialogue with the Kashmiris. If they have dialogue with Pakistan, we can at least try and find ways to diffuse the situation. And that situation is out of control of the Modi government. They will not be able to control it. They will have to resort to atrocities. As you mentioned, genocide at one time. Yes, we've talked about this possibility of that happening. If the insurgency becomes strong and the Indian government wants to repress it, they will have to resort to something like genocide in Kashmir. So they're in a box, political box. Whether they realize it or not is a different matter. But Mr. Modi has put India in a political box in Jammu and Kashmir. And if they want to get out of that box, they have to talk to Pakistan.
So, sir, do you see any possibility, or how do you propose an implementation of a peaceful resolution may come about for all these lingering disputes?
Did you ask me, Sabir?
Yeah, I'll go again. So I said, is there a possibility of a peaceful resolution? Or how do you propose an implementation of a peaceful resolution may come about where all these issues are concerned?
Thank you. No, to all issues, to all conflicts between states, solutions can be found. If there is a willingness on the part of the two sides to find a solution. What is critical is that the solution for Kashmir must be acceptable to the people of Kashmir. That is a critical point, which, sometimes the whole effort at negotiated settlement, this is what we ignore, is that we cannot find a solution if it is not acceptable to the Kashmiri people. They will resist one side or the other if they find it unacceptable. So whether, third option, fourth option, there are many options. And they, at least during the Musharraf government, we explored many options. Some of them were less acceptable than others. solution may not be the best one that is acceptable to either country, but a solution will have to be found diplomatically. There are ways. We have all the imagination to find innovative solutions. You see what happened in Northern Ireland. So solutions can be found, but the bottom line is we have to make them acceptable not only to the two countries, but also to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. That's a critical point that we have to address in any negotiation.
Thank you, sir. Just a little addition to that. While you were tabling the motion for Pakistan, at the UN, you said that nuclear disarmament needs to be pursued in a comprehensive and holistic manner. Can you elaborate on that?
Certainly. You know that the various proposals have been made for denuclearization throughout the world. And there is, of course, at the first level, there is a vast disparity between the nuclear arsenals of the two major nuclear powers, which is the United States and Russia, both of which have about 2,500 deployed nuclear warheads at the present time. And then the others, the rest have the three other nuclear weapon states. France has about 300, UK has less than 100, China has about 300 to 400 warheads. So there's a great disparity in the levels of nuclear disarmament, which has to be taken into account in any negotiation towards the nuclear weapons world. And then there is Pakistan, India, Israel, and DPRK. Each one of them has de facto nuclear weapon states. All of them, if a nuclear disarmament effort is to be made, all of these countries will have to join together in reaching a solution for nuclear disarmament. But what is more important is when you ask a country to disarm or disarm its nuclear weapons, one has to see whether its security concerns will be improved or will be made more negative. Now, in the case of certain countries, I think with the major powers, a major nuclear disarmament effort will improve security because they have no threat to their security from conventional means. For smaller countries like Pakistan, which is facing a major neighbor with larger conventional capabilities, the elimination of nuclear weapons without addressing the conventional imbalance will be a net negative. And therefore, we need to look at both the nuclear and the conventional in that case. So that is the idea, is it has to be comprehensive, covering all nuclear weapon states and the levels at which they hold nuclear weapons, and it must also take into account the conventional balances that are threats to the security of each one of these states. That's the idea that I voiced in the term comprehensive nuclear disarmament.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our speakers for this evening. Thank you very much. Both of you, according to Mr. Javed Jabbar, let me read out. He said, both speakers have been very insightful. He's written something, I'd like to read that out. He said, do note that in 2018, the Modi BJP received only 37% of the votes cast, but a majority of seats due to the unrepresentative nature of the first past the post system. Hopefully the majority of India does not support BJP policies. This is Javed's opinion. In the end, I'd really like to thank you, or both you speakers. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank my facilitators, I'd like to thank my district governor, Dr. Farhan Issa, for giving us this time, this space, and encouragement towards holding this session. This is one of the Peace Talks sessions. And to everyone else who logged in, thank you very much. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Naved Khan, the chair for this evening, for his concluding remarks. Mr. Naved Khan?
Am I on? Okay. Do you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
First of all, I'd like to thank my friend Munir and Shahid Bhai both for joining us. And, like giving a much clearer picture on this issue than most of us have. And Javed came in and, his point of view was also very illustrative. So I thank all of you, and we would like to continue our efforts. And as Javed has always been saying, that we need a little more of what we refer to as the track to diplomacy. We need to have a contact. We have this thing of talking to each other. Unfortunately, the two governments have this thing of talking to each other, but they're not listening to each other. We need to develop this thing of listening. We need to have more contacts. Like in our case of Rotary, we've been going to India and staying in the homes of our friend Rajiv Chopra, who joined in, Naveen Sardana, who joined in. They've been coming over to Pakistan. They've been staying in our homes. We need to have more and more of these things. We need to have people contact, and only then we'll be able to, influence or make people understand how the two countries really should be moving. I'd like to thank all of you and everyone, and I'd like to close the meeting, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Munir.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you.
Khuda
All the best.
Thanks, Naveen. Okay. Okay.